I have Facebook open in a different
Wonderful.
window.
All right, Zoom says it's redirecting this to our Facebook live feed so that we should be live here in just a moment with Rachel Claypool, who is an anchor and producer for WTOV in Steubenville, Ohio. Rachel also has a connection to Temple, having grown up here. Her mother teaches in our Hebrew school program, and the two of you are wonderfully connected and involved still. Rachel, how are you doing right now?
I'm doing okay. Yeah, I'm hanging in there. I'm definitely glad that I have work to go to still. Definitely glad that I have a reason to get out of the house every day, something to do. Well, not every day, but during the week. I feel like I would definitely be going a little bit stir crazy if I didn't, but I'm doing okay.
Right? Makes perfect sense to me. For those who are joining us, whether they are local or half a world away, help us out. I'm new to the area. I had to Google it. Where is Steubenville, Ohio?
So Steubenville, Ohio is pretty much due west of Pittsburgh and right across the Ohio River. So you go Pennsylvania for a while, and then there's like 8 miles of West Virginia in the northern panhandle. And then the Ohio River is the border between West Virginia and Ohio. Steubenville's right across the bridge.
So what's it like to be in the newsroom? What's it like to be in studio right now? Describe the atmosphere, describe the kind of that weight you carry.
Yeah, so first and foremost, the biggest physical difference that exists in our newsroom at the moment is we actually have a lot more space between each other now. The building is a lot more empty. It's not just the news crew that works there. We have the folks in the control room, we have sales, promotions, production, and those folks are all at home. The only people coming into the building are the control room folks and the newsroom folks. So I have far fewer coworkers who are actually physically in the building every day. So that's definitely kind of weird. I'm used to almost colliding with people in the hallways every time I'm trying to move around to a different part of the station. But now it's kind of like a ghost town. So that part is certainly strange. It feels pretty empty. I work 2 to 11 during the week. So I usually see the dayside crew and the nightside crew. And, there's usually a lot of us. It gets more empty at night, but I also happen to work at 5 in the morning on Saturday when there are 3 people in the entire building, and it feels more like a Saturday morning during the week than it ever has before. Yeah, and we have like a bullpen style office for the newsroom where we have little pods of desks and people sit pretty close to each other. I sit right next to our executive producer, so I don't even have to turn my head. I can just say, "Hey, Paul, what's going on today?" And that's not true anymore. For a while, Paul wasn't even coming into work because he's older and he has some health risks. So our boss was saying, "Don't come in. We don't want to risk it." But he is coming into work now. But he has his own conference room on the other side of the building. So that part is definitely weird. That there are even fewer people. There are like maybe 10 of us in the building, and there are only like 4 of us in the actual newsroom. So that part is definitely very strange. And it's also very, it's not quite as tense as it first was when all the coronavirus stuff started happening. There was definitely a certain intensity to it. We were getting daily briefings from the governor of both Ohio and West Virginia, because our viewing area incorporates both states. And it was always sort of scary, like, "Oh no, DeWine's talking. I wonder how much coronavirus is in Ohio now." And the same with Justice in West Virginia. I remember very well the day that West Virginia announced their first case of coronavirus, because for a long time they were the only state without any positive cases. But that day, Governor Justice was supposed to speak at 3. So we were all set up to record his press conference. We had someone standing by to listen to it so they could pull sound from it. And then all of a sudden at like 2:55, it got rescheduled for 6. And we were like, "Oh boy, we know what's coming now." But since then, it's a little bit less intense because it's not new to us. More cases is not great. We don't like hearing that, but it's not quite the same oh no, it's coming for us kind of feeling at this point, because it's already here.
Right, that's right. So as I am talking to you and monitoring our Facebook feed as well, I would like to add for those who are joining us that you are welcome to use the comment feature to ask any questions you may have, and I will work them into our conversation today with Rachel Claypool, who is a producer and anchor at WTOV 9 in Steubenville, Ohio. Rachel, I'm going to ask you a question and then make you the focus of this interview. Jump off the Zoom call for just a quick second as I adjust the lighting in this room.
Sure.
You're making a lot of choices about what gets on the air. How do you decide? Where is the balance between what people want to hear, what people might need to hear, what probably isn't good for them to hear? How do you decide what becomes part of your newscast?
Right. So on a regular day, our two biggest considerations are usually how many people in our viewing area will the story affect, and how important is the information within the story. So, for instance, we had a story about a compressor station in Saline Township that people who live near it were worried that it was, spewing some kind of toxic kind of chemical out of it, and they were suffering some kind of symptoms from that, and they thought it was from being near that compressor station. So Saline Township is not very large. The reach of the compressor station isn't very large, but that's pretty important information, So even though it didn't affect that many people, that's something that we definitely wanted to cover, because it affects those people a lot. And Saline Township is not unique in the fact that it has a plant like that. So, for all we know, there could be another small place with a compressor type station that's giving them similar effects, but maybe they don't realize it. So if they see that story and think, oh no, maybe ours is doing, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. In terms of choosing what goes in about the COVID-19 outbreak, pretty much all of it. We don't want people to panic, but we do want people to be informed, particularly in our viewing area where internet coverage is bad, and sometimes even telephone service can be bad. A lot of times the only source of information that people in our viewing area has is our TV station. So they rely on us for things like the governor's press conference, the president's press conference, briefings from the CDC and people associated with handling the outbreak, particularly with how it's unfolding abroad, right? People who don't have an internet connection probably don't know how bad it is in Italy, the measures that they're taking in Italy, how it started in China, what they were doing to try to stop the outbreak and all that. So we try not to hold anything back. We don't, like I said, we don't want people to panic, but we do want them to be informed, to be extra careful about hand washing, to be extra careful about social distancing. Don't go hang out with your older parents or your grandparents if they're even more at risk for the coronavirus than younger people are. And then the fact that the coronavirus did start affecting younger people more. So no one's immune. So that's something else that's important, because that was pretty much the status quo for a while, is that younger people didn't have to worry about it as much. But that's not exactly the case anymore, as we've been hearing. So in terms of coronavirus, we try to get everything that we can out there. Every day at 5, we have like a health segment in the 5 o'clock show. So that's also been very important. Trying to do more than just coronavirus health news, of course, because there are other health considerations that you just have to take into account no matter what, pandemic or not. But a lot of that is also, how to avoid spreading it, how to avoid contracting it, how to avoid those kinds of things.
Yeah. I imagine that particularly in this time where the news of the day is really driven at an international, federal, state, local, there's just so much all on this one topic. imagine there are a lot of stories that are being either left behind or things that you wish you could be covering a little bit more. What's crossed your desk that you wish you could spend more time on? Or what would you, if you got to wave your magic wand and make some of these challenges go away, what are those types of stories that you would want to be airing now that you just haven't had opportunity to do?
That's a really good question. I think locally we're doing a pretty good job with what's on the minds of our viewing area. You know, one of the bigger ones is what places are open that I can go get food. And that's something, you know, we have a running tab on our website of what restaurants are still doing takeout. And we're encouraging those restaurants to contact us and tell us that they're still doing that. So in that respect, I think we're doing a pretty good job of helping our viewing area know what's available to them within 50 miles, right? I think my biggest challenge right now is actually some of that national news. As we have both an NBC channel and a Fox channel, so we pull from all the major news outlets, right? We have access to NBC's news source, Fox's news source, and CNN's news source. So we have a plethora of national news available to us, but they aren't feeding us as much about, for instance, the stimulus packages, the economic relief packages. Those are things that I wish, if I could wave a magic wand and have WTOV have a national reporter, someone who worked out of a DC bureau somewhere, that would definitely be something that I wish that we could cover more for our viewing area, because some of those economic stimulus packages would particularly affect our area, who, you know, it's terrible to hear about people who are getting furloughed and laid off and can't go to work. You know, if you're a gig worker and you're not getting any gigs anymore because of the virus, then, you know, that's not good news. If you're a waitress in a restaurant and now they're only doing takeout, you're a little bit obsolete for the next indefinite period of time, which is frightening and scary. And in the Ohio Valley, a lot of people already were out of work, regardless of the coronavirus. And, you know, that's true of places around the country as well. But, you know, I see it the most in the Ohio Valley where I work. So, you know, those things would be very helpful to, you know, the coal miners who don't have coal to mine anymore. But yeah, that's something that I wish that we had a little bit more of a beat on.
It'll be interesting to follow today's news as that's moving or not moving, as the case may be, through the Senate, and now that a number of senators are in quarantine, what that's going to mean, which begs a question on a different direction. How often do you watch the news, and where do you turn as someone who has a more discerning eye than many? Who are you watching? What are you watching? How often are you watching personally, in addition to what you feel compelled to do professionally?
Yeah, I watch the news enough that I'm never happy about it, and I don't have anywhere in particular that I turn, really. I usually think it's best to try to, it's more difficult this way, but I try to wade out into the surf and, you know, pick and choose from a variety of places so that I feel like I'm getting the most that I can out of the experience. I often will, you know, I think, you know, surfing headlines on Twitter is never a good way to get deeply informed about something, but it is a good way to find the common, you know, find the common themes in those headlines and think, okay, that's something that I'm going to look into further now. I have an app called Smart News, which is an aggregator that pulls from pretty much anywhere in any news source. But that can be a little bit of a fire hose, a lot like Twitter is. So it's just about trying to learn what headlines really mean and whether or not it's worth my time to actually read it. And if I read a story about, you know, for instance, if I were to read a story about a stimulus package, I wouldn't read just one. I would probably go and read everybody's take on it, because every outlet, when you're writing a story, there are certain decisions that you have to make in terms of what minutia details you throw in there, because if you were to write an all-encompassing piece on a stimulus package, it would be a million words long, right? Because the bill itself is probably a million words long. So every outlet will choose different minor details to include. So the more you read about any one thing, the better. But of course, that does mean that I end up spending a lot of time sometimes reading about even just one thing, because it can be very difficult to. No one will ever know everything about any one thing, but I try my best.
And I think that's one of the challenges we face, that particularly those outlets or those stations that are compelled to fill many hours throughout the day often turn away from news and into commentary on that news, which can lead us down some challenging paths.
Yeah, that's something that I think is actually quite nice about local news, right? We have, let me think about this. We have at TOV, we have 4 hours in the morning, a half hour at midday, 90 minutes from 5 to 6:30, and then 90 minutes from 10 to 11:30. And our 11 recently got extended out to an entire hour because some of the night shows aren't producing anymore because of the coronavirus. They don't want to bring studio audiences in, so now they're just doing reruns. Or we had the option to either take more reruns or to extend our newscast, and we decided to extend our newscast. So now we have 2 hours in the evening. But that's far less than 24 hours to fill. So we have to be a little bit more picky and choosy with what we put into our newscasts, which is kind of nice because it means that we have to, cut out the garbage, so to speak. And particularly when you have local news that you have to cover, you don't have as much national, which means that you're cutting down to the bare bones of the national stuff that's going to matter to your viewing area. So that's kind of the nice part about local news. That's something I really like. There's no time for commentary, so you're getting pretty much straight news, which is nice.
Yeah, so we have a couple of questions on Facebook that I would love to be able to entertain. First, to see how you sense your viewers are taking this. Would you say that your local viewers are taking this seriously and it's of great concern to them? Would you say that there's skepticism, as we saw throughout the country, with perhaps politicization of this, or accusations that it was being used for political purposes rather than a public safety thing? What do you hear from people? What's your sense of your viewers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think our viewers are taking it pretty seriously. West Virginia, for instance, is one of the states with the highest number. Well, not the highest, but West Virginia has a high number of older Americans and Americans with pre-existing conditions. So those are the two biggest risk factors for contracting the coronavirus, right? It's going to hit those people the hardest. So I think, especially in West Virginia, where if you are not an especially high-risk American, at least a few. So I think they're taking it very seriously. And I think our viewing area is taking it very seriously because in West Virginia and Ohio, non-essential businesses are closed. And a lot of businesses in our area are local businesses run by regular local people. And they rely on those businesses to survive, to provide for their families, that kind of thing. So, when it's getting bad enough that they have to shutter their doors or slash their services down to only takeout or down to, only so much, I definitely get the impression just from the number of restaurants, for instance, who are contacting us and saying, hey, please tell everybody I'm still doing takeout. Churches who are calling us and say, hey, please tell our congregation, a lot of them don't have the internet. Please tell them that services are canceled. We don't want them showing up and getting coronavirus. And, we've had calls from people who are concerned about, are our hospitals prepared for it? Are our local hospitals prepared? Especially given we've had 3 local hospitals close in the Ohio Valley in the last year. So, there's particular concern over a hospital called East Ohio Regional, which closed a few months ago and is just sitting empty now. And there is a proposal to reopen that as an auxiliary place for, patients to go. Because if you have someone who's having a heart attack amid the coronavirus outbreak, you don't want to be putting them in the same bedroom as someone who has the coronavirus. So I definitely get the impression that our viewers are taking it pretty seriously, because it's definitely affecting them a lot.
Sure. And you do a great job pointing out in some ways how fragile our American system is right now, our healthcare system, the way we compensate people for their work, and how there might be some misalignments between who we value in society. Or these issues are all coming to the fore right now.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have another question on Facebook that I'm going to lead you into apolitically, and if you choose to go otherwise, that is entirely up to you. I just don't want you to feel trapped into it. A questioner points out that there are many different people talking about this at both a federal and state level, and that sometimes we get conflicting information even in the same press conference, or that some people seem to be doing a better job of taking seriously their efforts to reassure the public, and others may be less concerned about that at this time. When you're trying to decide who to turn to or whose broadcasts you bring in, do you factor in some of those differences and make choices that you think would be good to your viewers? Do you always go with perhaps the best known or the one who has the widest audience? How do you decide between folks who are speaking on the same issue?
That is an excellent question. I think what we've been doing is relying mostly on our county health officials, and relying mostly on what we're getting from Governors DeWine and Justice. We're also trying to talk to actual people in the Ohio Valley, because what matters most to our viewers is how, what are they going to do if they fear they have if they fear they have the virus and want to get a test? What are they going to do when, you live in Belmont County and East Ohio Regional is closed? So I think, we're trying to rely on information that we're getting from like the CDC and the NIH. And of course, we always listen to the president's press conferences in case there are any national measures that are being taken that we have to inform our viewers of. We listen daily to the press conferences that we get from DeWine and Justice. And we rely a lot on our county health departments as well, because they are our frontline individuals for what's happening in each of our counties. Because in a local newscast, that's what they want to know. They want to know, is it in my county? Is it in my neighborhood? How afraid do I have to be on a day-to-day basis? And of course, we're encouraging, all those proper CDC guideline things, hand washing, social distancing, and that gets mentioned pretty much anytime we mention the virus. But at the same time, we're trying to stay away from that quagmire, right? We're trying to, whatever information seems to be the most consistent across the board. We're not trying to give a Republican or a Democratic take on it. We're trying to give a scientific, this is what the Johns Hopkins coronavirus tracker says is the number of cases in any given place. Our county health officials are telling us X, Y, and Z. Governor DeWine says this. So, if any stores are doing special hours, right? Like Walmart is doing some special hours for seniors to shop only. That's something that we like to throw in there. Walmart is a store that, you know, a lot of our viewers rely on. So I guess to answer your question, we're just trying to avoid having that problem.
And you are doing it admirably well. I think it's so important. You know, Steven Pinker from Harvard writes about this availability heuristic, that when we get all caught up in the news that's happening everywhere, it can ramp up our anxiety here, even if, right, even if that's not the case. It's just because we continue to see it, we start to feel more anxious and threatened when it's what's happening locally. It's what's happening at our local and city and county level that matters. And I commend you for that. You know, I'm so grateful for your time, and I realize you have a long day of work ahead of you. That's the last question I would have for you is, you know, you find yourself working harder during this than ever before. What are you doing to keep yourself safe, both physically and emotionally, as you work on behalf of people who need your voice right now?
Yeah, I am trying to relax even more than usual on my off days. You know, I'm trying not to listen to every press conference that every governor gives on Saturday and Sunday when I'm not having to be at work. I, you know, at work, I'm trying to, because a lot of my coworkers are sequestered in different parts of the building, and it's in an effort for some social distancing so that we're not all on top of each other. We have a lot of Lysol, a lot of hand sanitizer around. I was never really one for like disinfecting my phone. I would, you know, clean it off because it gets dirty, but I'm actually disinfecting my phone. And like I mentioned, our executive producer, who's now sequestered in a room on the other side of the building, I'm trying, you know, when he's here, I'm trying to, you know, make an effort to make sure he feels included in the proceedings. You know, go and knock on his door, stand in the doorway, can't go into the room and talk to him, but stand in the doorway, say hello. You know, just that kind of thing, trying to stay connected to people. In a way, it's nice. I actually see my dad now because he and I work off hours from each other. You know, he has a regular like 9 to 5-ish schedule, whereas I work 2 to 11. So he's usually out of the house by the time I wake up and usually asleep by the time I get home, because I get home around like midnight. But now I actually get to see him during the week, which is nice. So silver lining, I suppose. Yeah, and I'm doing a lot of Skype calling, a lot of, you know, FaceTiming kind of thing with friends, and particularly some of my friends from college who live in West Virginia or were in West Virginia. There was a case in Monongalia County, which is where Morgantown is, where I went to school, and a friend of mine was living there. He was a grad student, so, you know, I was worried about him. A friend of mine just had a baby and lives in West Virginia, so I'm particularly worried about her and little Catherine. But it seems that they're, you know, taking the proper precautions as well. So it's just that kind of thing, you know, trying to stay connected to people, taking proper health risks, and trying to compensate for the lack of social, or no, not health risks, health precautions is what I meant to say. But also trying to compensate for the social drawbacks of something like social distancing, right? So.
Absolutely. You know, I heard last night with psychologist Julie Bowden that we should be wary, and I love the language you're using, that it's not social isolation. That's when we run into a problem, right? It is social distancing, and there are things we can do to overcome that. Rachel, I'm so glad those tips that you shared that you're doing seem to work for everyone who is tuned in with us this morning. Rachel Claypool, producer and anchor of WTOV 9 in Steubenville, Ohio. I'm grateful to you for your time and for everything you're doing to help us all get through this challenging time. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me, Rabbi.